Hello, welcome to another episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green, and joining me today all the way from Las Vegas, but he's Canadian in Las Vegas. That's like a title of a book, The Canadian in Vegas. It's Wayne Turmel, author of Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc, and so much more. How are you doing today?
I am ridiculously well and thrilled to be on the podcast with the most honest title in history.
Yes, it is. It is
It's
because
like from the Who Are We Kidding collection. We know why we're here.
yeah, exactly. I write books too, and whenever I'm on all these
Right.
kind of things, it's nice to go on and chat to people. It's nice to get new people going. Who's this person? I would like to be interested, but I would also like at least one person to buy one of my books. So,
Indeed.
hence the name of the show. What are you selling? So we will get to what you're selling a little bit later on. But yes, I'm glad you approve.
I am all about violent transparency.
It's good. It's good to be upfront about it, right? So the reason I came up with what you're saying it was for that reason, but also I was when I first decided to do this, the first person that I was interviewing is someone who's a good friend of mine, and I just said it for a laugh, and then I was like, you know what? I actually think I'm just going to keep it as what are you selling for the entire time. So there you go.
Yeah, as much as, we're all artists and we do this for the art and all of that stuff, the occasional sale would be lovely, wouldn't it?
It would be lovely, yes, it would. So, anyone who's listening at home, watching on YouTube or listening to us on Spotify or wherever it is that you get your podcast, please do buy one of Wayne's books. All the details are below in the show notes. And also, if this is your first time on the channel, your first time you're watching to us or listening, please do subscribe. On this channel, we have many interviews with authors with their wonderful work. We also have live readings. We have my own work that comes up on here as well. And we also have the Wheel of Time show called Easing the Reader with my co-host, Chris Murray Holtman, where we talk about the Wheel of Time series from a writer's point of view, including the TV series. So, Wayne, thanks for coming on to the show. You've got a very varied background. I believe before you were a writer, you were a stand-up comedian.
The police refer to it as a checkered past, is, I believe, how that is framed. I straight out of high school, I proceeded to spend almost 20 years as a touring comedian. This was back in the 80s and early 90s when there was such a thing and one could actually make a living at it. And that's what brought me to Los Angeles to become a big star. And you can see how well that worked. So I was forced to join the real world. I have spent the 20 years since in the business world, making a perfectly lovely living, writing and teaching and writing books. I've got like 9 nonfiction books out. I think. And then about 10 years ago, decided that even with all that, I'd never be a real writer until I tackled a novel. And so Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc is my 4th novel. And the sequel to that will be out in December, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker. See, you grinned, which is exactly the point.
Yeah, nice.
This is it's a fun series, and so I write fiction to save what's left of my sanity once the day job is done with
it. Sure. So you mentioned before you have 9 non-fiction books. So where did that come about? Was there always like a burning ambition to be a writer, or was it just?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what got me into stand-up. Was the writing component of it, and writing jokes. And then for a brief period of time, I thought I could transition to being a TV screenwriter and had some close calls, and that never happened. So the writing bug was always there. And early in my business career, I got the chance to write articles, and then somebody asked me if I would contribute a chapter to a book, and that was my gateway drug. And then for those of you who are consultants, independent writers, artists of any kind, the best calling card you have for your business is a book. You know, when clients say, "Why should we hire you?" You go, "Because I wrote the book." And so that got me into writing the business end of things. It was purely mercenary.
Well, what isn't? What that's the whole point of life, I think, is to be a mercenary as much as possible. So you had the non-fiction books, and then you started writing historical fiction. So what?
Yeah, I had become obsessed with this real life character named Byron de Prorock, and went down a very deep rabbit hole and thought he's this fascinating character. And so he was the subject of my first novel, The Count of the Sahara, which was very nicely received and was so much fun to do. And then I wrote another pair of historical novels, Acra's Bastard and Acra's Orphans, which were set in the Crusades. And then just as I started to get a little reputation for myself, I decided to completely switch genres and tick off both my readers and start from scratch again in terms of building an audience. And so here I am in the urban fiction world, urban fantasy world, with Johnny Lycan, and there's the sequel is on the way, and there's a third book in process. So I guess I'm a novelist now.
Yeah, of course, you are. I did something similar to you. I mean, I didn't do historical fiction. I do like historical fiction. I do like history in general as well. But I do epic fantasy. But when I released my first epic fantasy book, I was like, instead of writing the sequel, I'm going to do an urban fantasy book as well. Right. So I have the two series, and then people are like, when's the next Nick Halloran book coming out? I'm like, after I've done the next epic fantasy book. So the epic fantasy people are happy, well, then the other people are not so happy. But
I suspect you're a little like me, which is I am bibliographically promiscuous, which is a nice way of saying I will read anything.
Yeah.
And as a result, the stories in my head don't fit neatly into these lovely little categories. Like Johnny Lycan has been a little bit of a challenge to talk about what I'm selling because it's urban fantasy. I mean, it's set in the modern world and he's a werewolf, but he's also a detective, and it's kind of a Jack Reacher, Spencer for Hire, blue collar detective thing. And oh, by the way, it's funny. So the horror geeks find it too light and fluffy, and the urban fantasy people, you know, my cover actually looks like a scary book, as opposed to most shifter novels, which have incredibly beautiful people with no body hair.
Yes. They don't.
Which makes no sense to me. If the guy's a werewolf, does he have to wax every 28 days? I mean, I don't.
Yeah. But they have lots of hair on the head, though.
They do.
They always have long hair.
They do some weird chest comb over thing, I guess. I don't know.
They do. So urban fantasy, it's a fun genre to write in. I think of it as like I don't find it easy to write it compared to like epic fantasy, but I don't have to. I'm trying to think of a way not to annoy people like urban fantasy, because one time I said I don't have to think about it as much, and people got quite offended by it. And I was like, what I mean is I don't have to like come up with all these different I don't have to describe like what a gun looks like. I don't have to describe what a telephone looks like, because people know what it is.
You know, that's what I thought. I thought after doing all this historical fiction, which was incredibly deep dives into facts and history and stuff, I could just make stuff up. And as it turns out, not so much. I remember there's a scene in Johnny Lycan where somebody is doing her first tarot reading.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 4 weeks of research, 2 tarot readings, and a deck of tarot cards purchased, so that I could write a page and make it seem logical.
Exactly. Because that's the thing, when you set something in the real world, even if it's still urban fantasy, it's still in the real world. So if you're describing something that exists, if you get it wrong, someone will know that this is not how this works. And they'll
Yeah,
tell
the
you about
only thing worse than urban fantasy people for that are anything involving guns or horses.
it. Right. Okay.
Because gun nuts will absolutely rip you apart if you get the tiniest little facts straight, which is why I don't write a lot of stuff with guns. Swords are way cooler than guns anyway.
Yeah, sure.
But interestingly, horse people have no sense of humor.
It's all the time spent in the sun, and also mucking out stables is going to really wear down your sense of humor.
I suspect that to be true.
Right. So when you had the idea for John, well, actually, when did you have the idea for Johnny Lake, and why did you have this idea of a werewolf detective? I can understand where the ancient Egyptian side of it comes from because you're a fan of historical fiction, so I can see where
Right.
that came in. But
Well, it's interesting. There are two parts to this answer. The Anubis disc piece actually was a short story that I had published in Storgy.com several years ago, and I thought that's a really cool thing. And I don't know, maybe I'll come back and do something with that. But the werewolf detective piece literally just came to me as I was noodling kind of stories, and I had seen a werewolf movie. I don't remember which one, and I started thinking about werewolves and what do they do in their real life, right? How do they just walk around and function?
yeah,
And some of it is, well, what job could a werewolf do? Well, something where he's sniffing and he's hunting things, and he needs to fight. And then it would also be incredibly frustrating. I mean, imagine you have hands the size of hams and 7-inch nails, and you're confronted with a doorknob.
right.
And
Yeah,
what do you do with that? Um, and so that's kind of where it came from. There was a Robert McCammon novel that I read years and years ago called The Wolf's Hour, where I thought it was a cool premise. Not only is he a secret agent, not only is he a Russian secret agent, not only is he a Russian secret agent fighting Nazis, he's a werewolf Russian secret agent fighting Nazis. And I just thought that was the coolest premise ever. And so I am shamelessly riding those coattails.
excellent. I love it when things just getting added on and added on. It's like, what could be better than this, right? We've got this. Let's add Nazis into it as well, right? And let's make him a werewolf too. Just keep going with it. Just keep going and see where your imagination stops.
Well, I think that's the best thing that writers have is the what if game.
Right.
Right? What if this happened? Okay. And most people sadly stop after one or two, right? You hit whatever trope, whether it's epic fantasy or whatever, they all have the tropes, and you can tell when somebody's writing with the hero's journey in one hand and the book in the other. But I like to just keep asking what if until I run out of ideas.
Yeah, that's a good way to approach it. So how long did it, I always ask people this question, how long did it take you to write this book from when you sat down?
It takes me about 8-9 months,
right,
to write a book and get it into proper shape. That's why I've been able to put out a book every year and a half.
sure.
Interestingly, the second book took over 2 years. Turns out that between the pandemic, which has been very good for my day job, ironically, but between the pandemic and the political chaos here in the US and moving to Las Vegas, it turns out existential dread is not great for the creative juices.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, you'd think it would be, but no, I'm in a fetal position and not really being terribly creative and amusing.
Yeah.
But I seem to be back on it because Johnny 3 is coming along quite nicely. So it will not be, almost 2 years between books.
Sure. It's the existential dread. My glass that I like to be 3/4 full constantly. Like that's the right amount for me where I can be like,
right.
you know, I can take this horror into my own stuff and everything. When it starts to get a bit more than 3/4, I'm kind of like, this is too much.
Well,
Take
it's
away
like when
from,
the war started in Ukraine,
yeah.
and I was like, if the universal conveyor belt would just slow down
Stop.
for a minute.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we have disease and we have political upheaval and we have, oh, look, here comes a war in Ukraine nobody saw coming.
Yeah. You
And it's
know,
like, just give us a break already.
yeah, it's one of the weird things about I live in Ireland, and it's one of the weird things about living in Ireland is that you know, we're neutral technically from
Right.
all of this, but we're in the EU, but we're neutral. But then we have America on one side, so we get all of America's news, and then we have England right next to us, and we get all of their craziness coming to us as well. And that's enough normally. Like this is quite enough for me, thank you. And then we have a war in Europe as well to add to it, and it's kind of like, can we just move further into the ocean, just like further south and into the middle?
Being Canadian, I totally can identify with that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I get it.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So it's a free book. Or is it going to be a free book series? Because you've said you've got the second one is written, third one you're writing at the moment. Is there more to come, or is it the trilogy?
It will be at least 3.
Okay.
I don't think, because I've set this huge thing, especially in book 2, I've set this huge thing that Johnny will eventually find his roots, and it's not going to happen in book 3.
Okay.
So I may be forced to do book 4,
Yeah.
but we'll see.
Yeah.
It's not like, I mean, the beautiful thing is, it's not like I have an agent or a publisher who is pounding on me because I'm contractually obligated.
Right. Yeah. 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 Sometimes they don't
So
mind. Sometimes they don't mind. Like I have a contract for one of my series that's free. I finished writing the second book, and I was like, you know what? It's going to be too much story for 3 books. I need to do a 4th book. Otherwise, the 3rd book is going to be 300,000 words. And they were like, that's fine. But then I guess if the first book was rubbish, they would have been like, please no. Right?
well, it's like my Luca Lapu stories, the Acra's Bastard and Acra's Orphans, my book set in the Crusade. It was kind of intended to be a trilogy. But I was self-publishing, and the notion of spending a year and a half writing a 3rd book when nobody bought the first 2 didn't really.
Yeah. Yes.
And Johnny Lycan is a much more blatantly commercial kind of book and is doing very well. So I love Luca and I love the stories. I think they're some of my best writing, frankly. But how much time can you invest in something? I mean, I'm old, so I don't have that much time and that many stories left in me.
So tell us a little bit about Johnny Lycan, the and the Anubis, the first book. What is, give us the blurb, give us a little bit of a taste of what we can expect when we pick it up.
Yeah, Johnny is 30-ish, lives in Chicago. He's been kind of a ne'er-do-well his entire life. His Lycanism, as it kind of manifests itself, is this condition that he's lived with his whole life. And as an adopted kid, he was adopted from Romania. Right. As an adopted child, they just thought he was hyperactive and not very bright and borderline violent. And so he didn't have a particularly fun childhood, left home soon as he could, kind of kicked around, did enforcing for loan sharks, did construction. But now he's trying to get this detective thing going. And he suddenly finds himself with a rich client who is willing to put him on retainer and pay him a buttload of money to go chase these relics for him, which of course are fake and useless because none of this stuff is real.
Or is it?
Well, Johnny starts the series thinking he's the weirdest thing out there.
Right, okay.
Like everything is normal except him being a Lycan. Mm-hmm. And the few other Lycans that he knows. But he's really convinced that other than that, the world is exactly as we think it is. Right. And he's finding out that's not necessarily true.
Excellent. I like it. I like the sound. I really do like the sound of this, actually. it's something that's right up my alley, because I love Egypt. I love Egyptology. I like private detectives. I like noir. So I will definitely be checking this out. So the rest of 2022, book 2 is written and it's coming out in December.
Book 2 is written. It's coming out December 8th. We're very excited about that. Book 3 is in process. I am chugging along nicely on that. So that's what's coming out immediately. In between, I'm busy writing the 3rd in the Long Distance Leaders series, nonfiction stuff. And so the Long Distance Team comes out in early 2023. So I'm doing double duty bipolar writing at the moment.
Yeah. I know that well. I ghostwrite, so I have that in my head all the time. It's like, what am I doing today? What kind of writer am I? Oh, I am Faye Academy romance writer today.
Yeah, today I am wearing my big boy clothes and I am writing about, Zoom meetings. and tomorrow I get to, quite literally tomorrow, I get to write about, somebody running around destroying idols and threatening to create havoc. So
excellent, the good stuff. Well, you'll have to come back on in December and talk to me about the second book when it's
be
released.
very careful extending invitations like that.
No, I mean it. As long as we're all still here, as long as everything's okay, whatever else happens in the rest of this year, the longest 3 months of all time. So
indeed.
Yeah, well, no, definitely. Because I'm definitely going to read this book one, so I will be looking forward to the second. Where is the best places where people can find you on the internet?
On the internet, good heavens, WayneTurmel.com is a reasonable place to start. My Amazon author page, where you can get the full breadth of my literary genius, and Goodreads. And then on Twitter, I'm just W Turmel, and I connect with almost everybody on Twitter. So
excellent, great stuff. Wayne, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me today.
Thank you for having me, my friend. This was fun. This was a fun discussion.
Excellent. And for everyone who stayed with us until the end, until next time.